I'm 34, male, and I've been running my own business for about 6 years. It's nothing huge, just a niche online store that grew from my passion for tech and gaming. It started as a side hustle in college, but after graduation, I threw myself into it full-time. Now it's my livelihood. I built it from scratch. Every late night, every dollar invested, every failure overcome was mine. Growing up, my relationship with my parents was distant, to say the least. My father was always about appearances, status, prestige, and legacy. My mother followed his lead, never really questioning his decisions. And me? I was the kid they tolerated, not the prodigy they could brag about at their cocktail parties. I wasn't athletic, didn't get straight A's, and certainly didn't follow the path they had mapped out for me. College was the only box I ticked before I veered off their approved route, deciding to focus on my business rather than law school. That choice severed whatever fragile connection we had left. For years, they ignored me. Not outright cruelty, just absence. I wasn't invited to family vacations or their elaborate holiday gatherings. The rare calls I did get were filled with veiled disappointment. Questions like, "When are you going to get a real job?" So imagine my surprise when they suddenly showed up at my doorstep last year. All smiles and warm hugs like the past decade hadn't happened. It was a Sunday morning, and I was in my home office packing orders. The doorbell rang, and there they were, my father in his tailored suit, my mother clutching a designer bag like it was armor. "Son," my father said, his voice dripping with faux sincerity, "we were just in the neighborhood and thought we'd drop by." I wasn't buying it, but I let them in, if only to satisfy my curiosity. They gushed over how impressive my house was and how proud they were of what I'd accomplished. It was surreal. For years, my success hadn't mattered to them. Now they were acting like doting parents. The next few visits came quickly, unannounced, and increasingly invasive. My mother started commenting on how I could modernize my decor. My father dropped hints about expanding my business, suggesting I should bring in experienced partners. Alarm bells were ringing, but I ignored them. I thought maybe, just maybe, they were trying to mend fences. Then came the bombshell. One afternoon, they sat me down in my own living room like I was a child. My father cleared his throat. "We've been talking, and we think it's time to get serious about the future of your business." "Excuse me?" I asked, already bristling. He leaned forward, his tone patronizing. "You've done well, but you're plateauing. It's time to scale up, and for that, you need guidance. Your mother and I are willing to step in and help." "Help with what?" "With running it, of course," my mother chimed in. "You've done all the groundwork, but we can take it to the next level." I laughed. Couldn't help it. "You have no experience in e-commerce or gaming. What exactly do you think you're going to do?" My father's face hardened. "We'll bring in investors. Use our connections. Position the brand as a legacy business for the family. We can't have you running it like a lemonade stand forever." That's when it hit me. They didn't care about me or my success. They cared about the optics of owning a profitable business. They wanted to slap the family name on it and claim it as their own. When I refused, things turned ugly fast. My father's voice took on that sharp, condescending tone I remembered from my childhood. "Don't be foolish. You're out of your depth. Without us, this business will stagnate." I stood my ground. "This isn't up for discussion. I built this. It's mine." End of story. But it wasn't. Within weeks, they ramped up their efforts. My mother began reaching out to my clients under the guise of networking. She claimed she was helping me expand my reach. Meanwhile, my father tried to bully me into signing a partnership agreement that would have given them partial ownership. When I ignored them, they escalated. They hired a lawyer and sent me a letter claiming they had invested in my business early on, a complete lie, and were entitled to a stake. I hired my own lawyer, who shut them down quickly. But the stress was eating at me. They didn't stop there. They started spreading rumors among extended family that I was ungrateful and taking advantage of their generosity. The breaking point came when I discovered they'd filed a frivolous lawsuit, claiming I defrauded them. Their goal was clear: tie me up in legal battles until I gave in. That's when I decided to fight fire with fire. I dug through every email, text, and document from the past decade, building a timeline that showed they had zero involvement in my business. I also hired a forensic accountant to prove that every cent invested had come from my own earnings. But I didn't stop there. Through some discreet digging, I found out my parents had been using my name to secure loans for their own failed ventures. They'd lied to banks, claiming they were co-owners of my business to inflate their creditworthiness. I filed a counterclaim for defamation, fraud, and emotional distress. My lawyer assured me the evidence was airtight. When the court date arrived, they looked shocked to see how prepared I was. My father tried to play the victim, painting me as a selfish son who'd forgotten his roots. My mother cried on cue, claiming they only wanted what was best for me. But the judge wasn't buying it. The evidence was damning. Not only did the court dismiss their lawsuit, but they were ordered to pay my legal fees and compensate me for damages. Their fraudulent loan applications were referred to the authorities for further investigation. Watching their faces as the judge delivered the verdict was satisfying, to say the least. After the case, I cut all contact. They tried to guilt me through family members, but I stood firm. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. The fallout was messy but liberating. I've since doubled down on my business, expanded into new markets, and am happier than I've been in years. If there's one thing this ordeal taught me, it's this. Family doesn't give anyone a free pass to exploit you. Feel like my story hit home? Stick around, I got plenty more where that came from. Cutting ties with my parents wasn't easy, even after everything they did. I'd spent my whole life craving their approval, even if I wouldn't admit it to anyone, not even myself. But after the court case, it was like a switch flipped. I realized their approval wasn't worth the price they wanted me to pay. Still, they didn't give up. A few weeks after the case, I got a call from a relative, my uncle. He's one of the few people in the family who's always been neutral, never taking sides in the family drama. He sounded concerned. "Your father's been saying some pretty nasty stuff about you, kid," he said, his voice low like he didn't want to be overheard. "He's telling everyone you cheated him out of his share of the business. Your mom's backing him up too." I sighed. Of course they are. They're trying to get the family on their side. It's not looking great. You might want to get ahead of this. I thanked him for the heads up, but I wasn't about to stoop to their level. If they wanted to trash me behind my back, let them. I had no intention of turning this into a he-said, she-said circus. But the damage they were doing started bleeding into my professional life. One of my suppliers, someone I'd worked with for years, suddenly stopped responding to my emails. When I finally got him on the phone, he was hesitant, almost nervous. "Look, I don't want to get in the middle of anything," he said, "but your father reached out. He said he's taking over operations, and, well, he implied you were stepping down." My blood boiled. They were actively sabotaging me now. I reassured my supplier that my parents had no authority in my business and that I was still very much in charge. But I knew this wasn't an isolated incident. Sure enough, I started hearing similar stories from other contacts. Clients, partners, even some of my employees had been approached by my parents, all with the same story. I was handing over the reins to them. They were trying to undermine my credibility, make me look unreliable. And in business, perception is everything. This was war now. I set up a meeting with my lawyer and a PR consultant. If my parents wanted to smear my reputation, I was going to fight back with the truth. First, I sent a cease and desist letter to both of them, warning that any further attempts to interfere with my business would result in additional legal action. I also contacted every person they'd spoken to, suppliers, clients, partners, and provided them with a written statement clarifying the situation. But I didn't stop there. I decided to go public with my story, not in a dramatic tell-all kind of way, but as a case study in resilience and overcoming adversity in business. I wrote a detailed blog post about the challenges I'd faced, including vague references to family interference without naming names. I framed it as a lesson in standing your ground and protecting what you've built. The response was overwhelming. Not only did I get support from my professional network, but my story also resonated with others who dealt with toxic family dynamics. It helped me regain control of the narrative while keeping my parents from spinning any more lies. But the final nail in the coffin came a few months later. Remember those fraudulent loans they took out in my name? Well, the authorities didn't let that slide. They were investigated for bank fraud, and while the case didn't land them in jail, It did result in hefty fines and a black mark on their financial records. Their credit was shot. Their social circle, people who cared about appearances as much as they did, started distancing themselves. Without their polished image, they were left with nothing but each other. I wish I could say I felt bad for them, but honestly, I didn't. They made their bed. Life after cutting them out has been peaceful. My business is thriving, and I've even started mentoring young entrepreneurs to help them avoid the pitfalls I faced. As for my parents, the last I heard, they were selling off assets to pay their fines. We haven't spoken since the court case, and I have no intention of reopening that door. It's strange how life works sometimes. The people who are supposed to have your back can end up being the ones who hurt you the most. But in the end, I learned that protecting your peace is worth any price, even if it means walking away from family. If you've stuck with me this far, you're probably someone who gets it. Hit subscribe. I promise there's more to come, and I'm just getting started.